being picked up by a lot of different news agencies, news organizations, and one of the shows was Rachel Ray. So they had me on once based off of a blog post. And then from there, I was on her show 25 times in the next 8-9 years or so. That also got me on the Dr. Oz show because I was doing a lot there, and then the doctor show at the time. And that is what truly exploded my practice back then.
Hello and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. So today's special guest is Dr. Anthony Youn. He's a board-certified plastic surgeon, best-selling author, and nationally recognized anti-aging expert who's been in private practice in Troy, Michigan for more than 20 years. Now, after earning his MD from Michigan State University College of Human Medicine, Dr. Youn completed his general as well as plastic surgery residencies in Grand Rapids, Michigan, followed by an advanced aesthetic surgery fellowship in Los Angeles. Now, he's the author of several popular books, including a new one called Younger for Life, as well as The Age Fix, a practical guide to looking 10 years younger. I need to read that. And In Stitches, his candid memoir about his medical journey. Now, he's also developed his own private label skincare and supplement lines that address beauty, wellness, and aging. Dr. Youn has appeared on numerous national media outlets and is the host of The Dr. Youn Show, a top-ranked podcast covering alternative health, beauty, and longevity topics. On top of that, he's built one of the largest and most engaged social media followings in the aesthetic field, educating millions through his videos, podcast episodes, and social channels. Now, suffice it to say, Dr. Youn has helped reshape the way people think about aging, beauty, and self-image. Dr. Youn, thanks so much for joining me on Beauty and the Biz.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure. So we always start out with, how did you get from fellowship to private practice? Was it a zigzag road or a pretty straight shot?
It was a pretty straight shot. So I did my fellowship with Dr. Richard Alamogan out in Beverly Hills. At that time, he was in practice with two of his younger associates, and he had these plans that he wanted to have a total of 4 people there. So before I left my fellowship, he offered me a spot in his practice right in Beverly Hills. And it was a tough decision. You know, my family lives in California, but my in-laws live back here in Michigan. And I really had this idea that the practice that he had in Beverly Hills was not necessarily what I wanted to have. And so we decided to come back to Michigan, and basically I started in the suburbs of Detroit. I opened up my practice basically from scratch, and now I've been in my 21st year of practice now.
Wow. So in Michigan, oftentimes the surgeons want to buy their own building and they want to get that all situated. It looks like you went into a very big building. So can you explain your practice and where you ended up, what location, and what the setting is like?
Yeah, so when I first started my practice, it was in Rochester Hills, Michigan, and I basically called up the local hospital there. I got privileges at that hospital, and I asked if they could refer me to somebody who could help me find a spot. So they said, "Oh, here's this realtor." I called the realtor, business realtor, and he found this spot in a relatively new building. And at the time, it was 1,500 square feet, actually a total of 3,000. So 1,500 on one side of the hall and 1,500 on the other side. And I thought, okay, I'll have my office on the one side of the 1,500, and then the other 1,500 I'll set aside to build out an operating room. Yeah. And so it turned out, first of all, that I didn't know, I've rented apartments in the past, and in the apartments, if you go to an apartment complex, they say, hey, it's $1,500 a month. You don't tell them, well, I want to pay $1,200 a month and give me 6 months of free rent. Like, you just assume you're going to pay the $1,500 a month. But in reality, in business, when you sign, let's say, a 5-year lease, depending on the location and all that, sometimes you can get a lot of other things from the building owner that you wouldn't know if you're just a layperson. And my realtor at the time didn't tell me any of this. So I paid top dollar for this 3,000 square feet. I got no free rent. I paid more than anybody else in the whole building. And I realized this literally, I think, a few months before I were to move out 5 years later. And so I actually was living near my office at that time, and we decided to move closer to kind of where the city is. And now I live in Birmingham, but our practice now is in Troy, Michigan, where there are a lot more plastic surgeons. And so I'm now in a high rise. I did look at potentially purchasing a building at one point, maybe even purchasing a condo. But honestly, Catherine, it came down to any place that I could afford to buy, I didn't want to be in because I wanted to make sure that it was a nice location. I wanted to make sure it was super safe, that I wouldn't worry about my employees if we were working like later in the evening. And so now I'm in a high rise. I do pay, reasonable in rent amount, but we have a lot of amenities. Safety is never an issue, and it's really nice. I did hire a different realtor, and he got me before I moved in. I think 3 or 4 months free rent. He got me all these leasehold improvements in the place, and all this other stuff that the other realtor never even told me I could get.
Nice. Did you get your own OR suite?
So I actually never did. So that was something I really thought about. And here in the Detroit area, there are a number of plastic surgeons who have their own ORs. And initially, I didn't have the budget or anything to actually develop it. And once I started getting busy in my practice, I realized that there were a lot of doctors in private practice in this Metro Detroit area with their own ORs, and they were constantly trying to find people to work at their ORs so that they can make some of the money back. In general, they weren't considered big money makers here. And so I thought, well, geez, I don't want to have to be put in that position. I'd rather be the person that could just go in, you do your surgery, and then you leave versus have to, worry like, okay, I'm taking a week vacation. Nobody's using my OR, and now I'm losing a ton of money on it.
Yeah. But at the time, I mean, did you know you were going to blow up like you did? And looking back now, do you wish, because we're not going to talk about it yet, but when you do social media, your reach is to the whole world. And I am assuming you have a lot of out-of-towners. So would your life be easier if it was all under one roof and you could easily do post-ops, pre-ops, everything all under one roof, or doesn't matter?
I think that there is an argument there. I think if I had associates where we could share the OR, then that would make more sense. So ideally, if I had one associate, then I think opening one OR would make a lot of sense because, you just go back and forth. Because I see patients now 2 full days a week. Monday, Wednesday, I see patients all day. Post-op consults every Tuesday, Thursday is when I operate. And I used to operate Fridays. Starting out when I started my practice, I operated full days on Fridays and eventually went to half day. Now I take Fridays off and I do writing and videos and stuff like that. But I think right now, like I said, if I were to open an OR, I would have to have an associate because, half of the week or more than that, it wouldn't be used. And I think that would be my concern is also with staffing. The way I run my practice, I've got 10 employees, but I have 9 employees, but the problem is I don't have an actual person running my practice. I just run it myself. I've always done that. And it's worked very well for me, but I'm very careful on who I hire. But I don't actually have a true office manager who actually runs a place.
Wow, I'm surprised to hear that. All right. But you do have other revenue generators in the practice. I was wondering if you had an associate, but you definitely have nurse injectors. Who else is in there making money for you?
So I have an esthetician, so a full-time esthetician. I have a medical assistant who also does some skincare type recommendations and stuff for my patients as well. But she also helps take care of my patients. So she does post-op work, and she will occasionally see patients for skincare type things. And then I have 4 injectors. I have 1 PA, a physician assistant. One of them is full-time, and all the other ones are part-time. So I have 3 part-time nurse, actually 2 part-time nurse injectors, 1 part-time physician assistant who does injections and helps me in the OR. And then I have 1 full-time nurse injector as well.
Gotcha. Do you find nowadays a lot of surgeons are going with the part-time employees for lots of different reasons? But do you find that difficult then to build a culture when people are coming and going? One point of that is I find that by doing it in my own business, the finger pointing happens. Like the one person said, but I didn't know about that because I wasn't there that day, that kind of thing. Do you find that happens or you have a pretty good handle on it?
I think we have a pretty good handle. So all of my employees start out full time. They're all women. And what ends up happening, Catherine, is they get pregnant and then they go part time afterwards. So yeah, my first nurse, I hired her when I was in practice maybe 2 years, and she was full time. She had kids, went part time. My second nurse same thing. And she's had 4 kids now. So she's had four different maternity leaves. Then I have a physician. The one hard thing was I actually had a nurse and a physician assistant at the same time, and they were kind of job sharing. So they would do all the injections, but they would be both part time, and then they literally got pregnant at the same time, and their maternity leaves were at the exact same time, and they were so afraid to tell me because they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to be the only one there." And they've got a full-time practice of injection patients, and then me with my own full-time practice, and they're gone the exact same time. And I didn't have anybody to bring in like temporarily to take them. And so those 3 months were not fun because yeah, I was swamped. But now I've got more, in which case some of them they go on maternity leave, and then the others will take the brunt of it. But yeah, that for 3 months early in my career, both of them went on maternity leave at the exact same time. It was crazy.
The chances of that are ridiculous, but that's life. That's when life gets lifey,
I think they planned it that way just to spite me, but no, I'm joking.
Any tips on hiring, motivating, firing?
Yeah, there's a few things. My employees in general stay long term with me. Because I treat them well, I pay them well, and there's a really, I think, a good culture. There's a family culture in the office, and so they're all actually very, very close, which is really nice to see. Now I'm picky on who I choose. The first thing I get most of my employees off of Indeed. Now back in the day when I first started hiring, we would go to Craigslist. I don't use Craigslist anymore. I tried monster.com and that never worked, and it was very expensive. So Indeed has worked pretty well for me. I think my first nurse I did get off Craigslist though, but now I go to Indeed, and what we do is I put the job information out there. You get a ton of replies. And then what I usually will do before I take my time to interview any of them is we'll look through the resumes. And then what I'll actually do is I'll email somebody who I'm interested in, and I'll have them jump through a few hoops before we interview them. So I'll ask, I'll reply to their resume and their email back, and basically say, I'm definitely interested. Before we do an interview, I'd love to ask you if you could do blah 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 blah. And so it could be like with a nurse, it may be like, can you tell me the difference between a hyaluronic acid filler and Sculptra? And yes, they probably don't know what it is. And if the person replies with a well thought answer, then I would take the next step in actually interviewing them. If they don't reply, then we know that they're not that interested in the job and they're not worth taking your time to interview them. And so that's one thing we'll always do that's been very helpful for me to save time, because before I even bring them into the office and interview them, I want to make sure that they are somebody who's going to be responsive, responsible. And that's the bare minimum, is that somebody, a boss replies to you, and I will probably, it's not an office manager, but it's actually me, ask them to jump through a couple of hoops. And if they do that, and I like what they've done, then we would take the next step to actually interview them. And we know what I did too, is I would actually ask them not to write the answer, but to make me a video of you explaining the answer. So not only do you have to, think about what the answer is, but you now have to create a video and send it to me. So you have to find out, okay, do they know how to use the internet? Are they tech savvy? And how do they speak? And how do they present themselves? If they reply with this video and they're in their sweatpants and with their hair that's a huge mess, or something, kids running around and stuff like that, then okay, maybe they're not going to be professional. They're not taking this seriously. So that's another thing that I always have done, and it's worked very, very well as a way to try to screen out potential applicants that aren't necessarily as good as they are maybe potentially on paper.
The video alone screens out probably 80% of people who don't have the initiative, the technology, the wherewithal, the whatever else you want to call that. I love that one. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's talk about. It's
been very helpful for me.
Your skincare and supplemental skin lines. Is that outsourced, or are you in the office doing fulfillment? How do you work that?
So I work with I have my own company that does all of that. It's a third party that actually ships it. So I don't have it in my office. We did have it in my office for a long time. And I know a lot of doctors who do out of the office. I think that if you can put it underneath your roof, then that's in some ways a lot better. One reason why is because of taxes. So for me, we actually do fulfillment out of Virginia, and I live in Michigan. So because of that, we have to do sales tax in both states.
Oh,
Whereas if you have a fulfillment from your own state, then you don't have to worry about sales taxes elsewhere. And so if I think it's just where I'm at right now. I just don't have the wherewithal to do it. And I work with a company out there that makes life much easier for me.
there's nobody in Michigan who can do fulfillment?
I did have a friend of mine up in Traverse City, but it's a few hours away, and
Yeah.
who was willing to do it. But I just have a third party do it because honestly, it's just one thing that I don't have to worry about because I'm busy taking care of patients most of the time. And to think about, okay, I've got a warehouse in town, or I know a doctor right now who does clothing, and she just opened up a storefront, and it's like I don't necessarily want to do that, either, because I don't think that the dollars are enough to pay to have an actual storefront or warehouse in your area. So I have a third party that they warehouse it, they ship it for me.
Honestly, a lot of the surgeons try to get into this for additional revenue streams, and it really sounds good. But when it gets down to it, are you willing to manage it? Is the quality control there? There are a lot of elements that go into that. And most, when it's all said and done, I say, was it worth it or not? And they say, it was a big headache. And did I retire on it? No. So, like,
I
what would you say about that?
I think that where you're really, I mean, in the end, we're surgeons. We're not marketers. We're not necessarily, I mean, we're entrepreneurs in our own way. And so that's where I would always say, there was actually Dr. Jennifer Ashton. She was used to be the ABC medical correspondent. I met her many, many years ago, and I used to do a lot of TV, national TV. That was one of the things that got me on the map. And one of the things that she said, never give up your day job because, that's really where all your skills are. And once you give that up, then it changes absolutely everything. And so I think that for me, that's really what it always comes down to is I'm not a salesperson. I'm not an entrepreneur as I'm a surgeon and I'm here to take care of patients. And yes, I have other things that I do and stuff like that. But in the end, business wise, it's the medical practice that's by far the most important thing.
The smartest practices know a big part of their practice growth comes from retention, referrals, and repeat treatments, not just from new internet stranger leads. That's why I created the KISS Loyalty Club, a done-for-you system that keeps your patients returning, referring, reviewing, sharing you on social media, and completing surgery. Discover how KISS can grow your own practice revenues by visiting kissloyalty.com today.
Regarding lead gen, we're going to talk about marketing in a minute, but you have to have a bucket load of leads coming into you for the marketing effort you put into that. How are you handling that? Because what happens is when you play the game like you are, you need infrastructure to be able to triage the leads, address them somehow, only work with the ones that are really serious versus all the looky-loos and the price shoppers. Do you have a good automatic lead gen process set up? And is that also outsourced, or are you trying to do that in-house as well?
I honestly, that's something where I think I haven't done as well in. So the issue right now, Catherine, is I have a 2.5 year waiting list. And I honestly am trying to figure out what to do with all these patients because I can't see them all. Now, I know some people who will do group consultations where they'll have 5 people in a room and they'll, do like a general consultation on breast augmentation. All of them are interested in that. And then you take 10 minutes with each one later on and stuff like that. I'm just not willing to do that. That was not how I was trained. So I still do half hour, 45-minute one-on-one consultations with each of my patients. But because of that, I have a long waiting list. And because of that, the problem is I know I'm losing some of these patients. They're going elsewhere. And I have some patients who tell me that they get on my schedule 2 years ago, and then they come to see me. They find their appointment finally comes up, and they're asking me to revise a surgery that they had done a year and a half ago. So it's like, it comes all the way around in the time they're waiting to come see me. And we've been trying to figure out ways around that. I have raised my consultation fee to a point where I feel like I can't really raise it any higher. I'd feel too guilty putting it any higher. I have raised prices, although I'm not, I don't charge $150,000 for a facelift or anything like that. But in the end, honestly, that's been, there is a bit of a cup that's over full and running over, and I'm losing some of that off the top. And part of it just is what it's going to be. Like, I'm not willing to operate faster. I'm not willing to operate more days necessarily than I do. And I'm not willing to spend less time with my patients, because I know that if I do spend less time and I put profits over quality of care, then there's going to be problems with that. I'm just not willing to do that.
The only lever you have is to keep increasing the prices because you have your scarcity issue there,
Yes.
and people who want you. And I mean, that unless you want to get an associate and then also get two ORs or something and like really grow this thing. Do you have any plans for growing this, or you want to stay the way you are? Because you seem like you have it covered. You have it covered.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty happy where I'm at. I did have an associate with me for 4 years, and she was great. And I thought, okay, at the time I had about a year and a half wait list. And when she was done working, she ended up going on her own 4 years later, and I still had a year and a half wait list. So it didn't really make much of a difference. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's a tough question of what to do with all of the patients. I don't really have any desire, honestly, to bring somebody else under my wing at this point in time. I know that makes a lot of sense to do that and to eventually sell the practice to somebody like that. I just don't really have a desire at this point to bring that in, even though I know business wise it makes a lot of sense. As far as raising prices, so I'll tell you right now, I charge $497 for a consult fee. And I do spend, like I said, half hour, 45 minutes with them. We put $400 of that consult fee towards any surgery. And so, we will deduct that from a surgery fee. And I have raised my prices over the years, but there's also the second part of it is like, I could raise it significantly more, but then my concern, honestly, is that, I'm not a surgeon who goes out saying I'm so much better than everybody else. Like, because I have a long wait list does not necessarily mean I'm a better surgeon than somebody in my area who has a 1 month wait list. It's just that I'm more well known, and so people call and stuff. But what I don't want to happen is to do an operation. Like, I wouldn't tell anybody that, oh, I've got all these special techniques. Like, oh, I give my facelift a special name. I give my breast augmentation a special name, my tummy tuck a special name, and all this stuff. I'm not going to do that. And if I did, my concern is if I raise these prices and somebody gets a complication, or maybe isn't 100% happy with the results, they're going to be even more upset if they paid twice as much for me as for somebody else who may have gotten them the same result too. So it's I think it's weighing. I think, obviously, being a business person with also, I think, trying to be an ethical physician, trying to just do what's best. I also don't want to just treat really, really rich people. Like, that doesn't interest me either too. Like, I like seeing a variety of people of all different socioeconomic groups. And if all I did is charge a ton of money, then I'm just going to be treating rich people. And that doesn't also appeal to me either.
You have all good problems there. Yeah, good for you. What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes you've made so far that others could learn from?
Gosh, so one of the biggest mistakes, I mean, I think business wise, I'm very conservative, but one of the mistakes that I have made is buying certain types of devices. I think that we get tricked by device manufacturers, and it's kind of like that old movie, Field of Dreams, where if you build it, they will come. And these device manufacturers will try to convince you if you buy it, the patients will come. And that is so not true at all. And so one of the devices I bought, and I'm not going to say anything bad about the company, but there was a company who made a device to help stimulate muscle contraction, saying, oh, you can get a better six pack and a bigger butt and all this type of stuff. And I paid a good amount of money for it. And I waited until we had 6-month results before I ended up considering purchasing it. It had a lot of buzz around it online and stuff like that. So I paid a lot of money. I don't think it was maybe $150,000, something like that, maybe more. Got the device. We used it somewhat. And then within a year of me buying the device, they came out with a new, improved version of that device. And they used the same name as the old device, but added a name before it, making it sound like my device was an old one. And very quickly, patients would call and they would say, how much does this cost? And we say, it costs this much. They go, well, you've got the old device. I don't want to pay regular price for the old device. I want to pay less. And very quickly, people stopped really asking about it. It sat in my office for about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And I sold it recently on eBay for $10,000.
Oh.
Yeah.
At least you got 10 grand out of that.
I was pretty happy. I mean, it was in great shape. It literally had not changed hardly any of the parts on it. It was in like almost pristine shape. And yeah, so I paid, like I said, probably 160 or something, and I got 10 grand out of it.
Now, as a consultant, I would have told you to stop and think about this for a minute. One
Yeah,
thing I know about a cosmetic patient, we will come in often if we're getting a result, a consistent result, we will come in. Do you remember sculpture? Like you had to make the patient come in 3 times. They were like you lose them at the second time, and then you try to put together membership clubs. Like, oh no, this because that
yeah,
device you're talking about, it's not a one and done. You have got to put some repetition into that. And you just have to know people. People don't stick with things very long. So I personally, I'd rather buy an IPL or a BBL or something
oh yeah,
that's like a workhorse,
yeah,
Anyway, that's my thought. Like who has the biggest pain points and how many of those people have that? So in the Midwest,
yes.
everyone's got sun damage, so just go there. Like, why do all
Yeah.
that fancy dancy stuff? I
100%. That's what I tell young surgeons is buy a jack of all trades. Don't buy something that's overly specialized, and don't believe if they tell you that the market, that people are going to come to see you for that. It's not even, the other one I got years and years ago, which I was really, really excited about. And I still have it and we use it. It's called Mira Dry. It's for armpit sweating. And at the time it was like, permanent solution to armpit sweat. Look at all the millions of people who have hyperhidrosis and all that. And so I was excited and I bought it and we brought it in and like nobody wanted it. And I remember I actually called that Grant Stevens. I saw him at a meeting one day, and I was like, are you doing well with this device? Because they said you were one of the big people in it. He goes, it does okay. And so we've had it now, gosh, 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. And now it actually is a bit of a workhorse for us. It's one of those where we get a couple of patients a month, but every month, just a couple. We don't advertise it. We charge a decent amount for it. People are pretty happy with the results, but it's not like an IPL where you're using it like every day, several times, potentially a day. Those are the devices that you really want to start out with. Don't start off by buying a cellulite device. Even though they'll tell you like 90% of women have cellulite, so you're going to be treating 90% of the population of women out there. No, like people aren't going to do that. They don't pay for cellulite. Seems like. Vaginal rejuvenation devices, same thing. They'll try to trick you and buy this instead. No, I agree with you. Get a platform with IPL where you can do hair removal, you can do veins, you can do dark spots, you can do red. Like that's the way to go when you're starting out. And when you have a bigger practice and you got a lot more people coming in, then maybe consider some of those specialty things. But even that, like I said, I've got a pretty good sized practice, and look what happened with some of these devices already. So just be very careful with those big purchases.
Well, and think about the cosmetic patient, the marketing of some of this. Like, it's not fun to market Miratride. The ads look awful. They're always showing it's yucky. It's like yucky marketing. I would stick to the good stuff. Grant Stevens would tell you, stay with the fat. Fat's where it's at. He'll like everyone's
Yeah.
got some fat that they don't want. Like that's a no-brainer. But then it became, pretty saturated, but still. I don't know. Anyway, so let's move on to marketing because you have got this one covered. Regarding competition, I don't know. What is the competition like in your area? Because you're not in Miami or LA.
Yeah.
How is it over there?
So in Detroit, it is a major metropolitan market. I trained out in Grand Rapids, which is the second biggest city in Michigan. I think Grand Rapids, they've got maybe 30 plastic surgeons there, 30 or 40. Here I think we're around like 80 to 90, something like that. And we've got a lot of very solid, good plastic surgeons. We don't have here in this area, we don't have like a Rod Rohrick or like, one of these massive, massive names here, but we have a lot of very well-respected, solid, like community plastic surgeons here. And so I think it's a competitive market, but it's nowhere near like New York, LA, Dallas, and those types of cities. And as far as marketing here, it is very interesting because I've been very focused on the marketing ever since I started my practice, because I knew when I started my practice that nobody knew who I was. And if I didn't get people to know who I was going to go under. I started out with $400,000 in debt. I had no patients. Nobody knew me. And I started literally going to different offices, bringing juice and juice and like bagels to family doctors' offices. I would give talks at like the Rotary Club and the Lions Club and the Orchestra Guild and all that stuff. And then I got really lucky because when I did my fellowship out in Beverly Hills, I did a show called Dr. 90210, which was one of the first reality plastic surgery shows.
Wait, did
And
you get on there from the guy you did your fellowship with?
Dr. Ellenbogen was on it the first season.
Oh my
And while I was doing
God.
my fellowship out there,
Oh my
and
God.
they taped a bunch of footage of us. They taped us at my going away party. They interviewed me. They interviewed my wife and all this stuff. And I had these dreams at the time that they were going to eventually come to Michigan and film me even in Michigan. Okay.
There they are. Yeah.
So I get a call. My practice is like dead in the water. I'm literally going to see a different. I'm getting my hair done every week just so I can give my card to somebody new, hoping that maybe they would give it to somebody. I was literally at that time calling urgent cares to see if I could just work at urgent care to make a few bucks to pay off my loans. And I was even thinking about driving back to Grand Rapids, a 2.5 hour drive to work at the urgent care that I moonlighted over there as a resident just to make $150. So it was pretty bad. And then I get a call from the producer of Dr. 90210, and they said, you're going to be on in like 4 days, like this Sunday, whatever. So get ready because you're going to be on. It's a great episode, blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't have an office at the time. Like I was subletting from an anesthesiologist, a pain doc. I had a fax machine in my apartment. And so I started faxing these press releases to all the local media. I wrote it up myself. I Googled how to write a press release. I wrote my own press release, faxed it everywhere. And I got a radio show that said, hey, you're going to be on Dr. 90210. Why don't you come on in? And so I was really excited because I thought, okay, I'm going to be on the show. They interviewed me. They interviewed my wife. They had hours of footage of us. And the show comes on, and I'm literally on it for 2 minutes. And then at the end of it, the doctor says, hey, he's moving to Rochester, Michigan. I made him an offer he can't refuse, and he refused it. And then they had me leave. And that was it, like done. And I was so disappointed. It was like we had champagne. I didn't have any friends. So it was just my wife, my dog, and myself in our apartment. But we had champagne and everything. And it was like, oh, that was it. Like that was my big break. Like I'm screwed. And then the next day I had on my phone, I didn't even have an office. So literally my office number went to my cell phone and the phone started ringing. And I had 10 new cosmetic consults the next day. I got on this radio show and they interviewed me for 2 hours. Now, this is back when like reality TV was relatively new. People didn't know anything about it. They interviewed me for 2 hours on it. The next day I had 9 new cosmetic consults and my practice exploded with all cosmetic patients just from that show. And then back then, it was on E! Entertainment. They would replay these shows over and over and over again. I don't know if you remember back then that they would literally on the weekends just do marathons of Dr. 90210. This show probably aired hundreds of times, going to millions and millions and millions of people. And it literally buoyed my practice for 2 years.
What topics were you talking about?
I'm sorry?
What topics were you talking about?
It was just, he had a nose job patient that he did a nose job and breast augmentation on. And I was just his fellow. And then he literally they just had my name there. He said he had a fellowship program and I was his latest fellow. And then that I left and that was it. But just that on there absolutely exploded my practice from literally contemplating going back to Grand Rapids and getting paid $150 for an overnight moonlighting session in urgent care to having like literally 10 new cosmetic consults a day. And that taught me the power of media and like, how do I properly then market myself?
And then did you get a PR agency and jump in full force? Because you've gotten a ton of media coverage.
Yeah. So I've hired, realistically, Catherine, I've probably in the last 20 years, I've had 15 publicists in maybe 20 years.
And
so
how many gave you results?
So I would say half maybe.
Okay.
So the problem with publicists is that you pay a retainer, and it starts at about $3,000 an hour, which that was back 20 years ago. Now it's probably closer to $4,000, $4,500.
Oh, it's way more.
Yeah, I paid as little as $3,000 way back in the day to as much as $7,000 or $8,000 a month. For a publicist, and none of them have any type of guaranteed results. I have tried to work with a couple of pay per placement agencies, and they never have gotten me anything. So you never see them really much because I think it's like it never works. Usually what happens is if you get lucky and usually you have to find a publicist, it's through word of mouth. So you have somebody that you know of that uses one that does well with it. And you never stay with them super long because at some point their contacts dry up and you need to move on. And so the longest I've stayed with a publicist is maybe 2 years, and the shortest has been like 3 months. And
Well,
I've gone
that
like
seems a
three
lot.
months with nothing, where you pay like 10 grand, 11, 12 grand, and get absolutely nothing out of it.
Well, they're only as good as their Rolodex lasts. And frankly, nowadays, I don't even think you could do it in today's world because the world is changing so quickly and everyone's roles last like minutes compared to years and years. Because when
Yeah.
I first got into this 25 years ago in San Francisco, I could literally just fax all the station managers. I knew all the station managers and I would just repetitively fax them and I'd say, what about this? What about this? And I became a resource to them. And I wasn't even in PR. I was just smart enough to go, wait a second, why don't I just go to the people who are in charge of the content, you know?
Yeah.
And but it was really exciting in those days. Nobody knew anything about this. But it's changed, but it's still very, very interesting. The problem is now it all went digital. And frankly, you're probably doing most of this on your own anyway now, aren't you? Or are you still doing
Um,
that?
Yeah, so what happened is I went from doing that TV. I started a blog many years ago called Celebrity Cosmetic Surgery. This is back when the
Oh,
blogs were
sure.
really popular.
Yeah.
Like Perez Hilton was real big and all that. And my blog got really, really popular too. And it was basically commenting on celebrities, plastic surgery, and really talking about like latest news in plastic surgery. And like anytime I start something kind of new, people come after me, plastic surgeons emailing me like, I can't believe you're commenting on celebrities. Your blog sucks. I'm going to report you to the board and all this stuff. But it actually became the number one most visited plastic surgery blog, other than, I don't know if you remember, there used to be a blog called Awful Plastic Surgery,
Hmm.
and it was super popular, had
Yeah.
a ton of hits. And mine was technically number two. But what happened, Catherine, is one day I was driving home. Actually, no, I was in bed. I was about to go to sleep, and I opened up my phone to check my emails before going to bed, and there was an email from an attorney threatening to sue me. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I posted a picture of Cyndi Lauper on my blog that I did not own. I copied and pasted it. It was everywhere. First of all, this is one of those photos just like all over the internet at the time, and it looked like she had a chemical peel. And so I just posted it. I'm like, oh, she looks like she may have had a chemical peel. Nothing, no big deal. Well, it turns out that the paparazzi who owned the photo found that and threatened to sue me. But it wasn't that they just threatened to sue me. They actually sued me as a reverse class action lawsuit, which, a class action lawsuit is when you have like multiple people suing one person for doing bad to all of them. A reverse class action is when you have one person who is wronged by lots of people, but instead of suing every single person, which is too difficult, they pick one high net worth individual to sue for the damages of everybody. Like, this is actually legal, okay? And so he was suing me for $150,000 for putting this one photo of Cyndi Lauper on my blog. And obviously it freaked me out at the time. I was still pretty early in practice. Like 150 grand was a ton of money to me at the time, obviously, as it still is now, but even more so back then. And I ended up contacting an attorney, and I scrubbed my website of all photos, anything that I could potentially not have, copyright ownership of, and it killed my site. I went from being like, I think I was getting like 10,000 views a day to like 1,000, 1,500. And so then that ended up killing my blog. But what that ended up doing, that blog at the time, is it ended up being picked up by a lot of different news agencies, news organizations, and one of the shows was Rachel Ray.
Oh.
So they had me on once based off of a blog post. And then from there, I was on like her show 25 times in the next like 8, 9 years or so. That also got me on the Dr. Oz show because I was doing a lot there, and then the doctor show at the time. And that is what truly exploded my practice back then.
And you have to hit when the iron's hot because then it goes away. Rachel Ray, nobody even knows who she is. I don't even know where she ended up, but that is amazing. I also looked at some of your stats, like your Facebook. You've got 1.5 million people on there. You've got 2,000 videos on YouTube. You have 1.6 million Instagram followers. I mean, you have crushed it on social media. But be honest, how much time do you spend doing that? Or how many people are you paying to make that happen? Because that kind of content that you're doing, that takes some real expertise, some real technical skill. And you need a really killer videographer or editor, or who's helping you do that?
Okay, so the truth is I've been doing this by myself for a really, really long time. So when really everything, so what happened is I was doing TV for a long time, and I started realizing that I was like an aging actor where the producer stopped calling me much, and they were going with other people like Dr. Whitney Bowe started doing all the Rachel Ray segments. So she took most of them from me. Dr. Oz, they started going with other doctors as well. And I started seeing the writing on the wall that like they're not picking me up anymore. And I do have a creative streak in me. I used to be in a band. So when I was in college, I was into art. When I was in residency, I was in a band. That band was all through residency. And then when I started with the practice and stuff, then I started writing my first book in stitches, and I started creating content, like pitches and stuff for these TV shows. And for many, many years, that was where my creative energies were going to, was creating pitches for TV shows, and they would pick a lot of them up. Now, some of them would get picked up by my publicist would do it. And other times, I knew the producers. And so I would just email them like, hey, here's some ideas. And they would just like, oh, like, we like this one. Let's book you for this date. And then they would fly me to New York and we would do it. But I started realizing that was drying up on me, probably because I was getting older. At the time, I was hitting 40, and they were picking a lot of, like younger 30-year-old doctors come in because they're better looking and younger than me. And so in the late 2000 teens, so like probably 2017, 2018, I started pivoting to social media because I knew that if I spent all my time creating these pitches, what would end up happening actually, and what started happening is that they would pick up my pitches and they would actually cast somebody else to do it. I did a Red Table Talk. I don't know if you remember, that was a show with the Will Smith's Jada Pinkett Smith. And that was really big on Facebook for a while. And I had this pitch for them and they did this big interview with me like, oh, we got to do this. And they never called me back. And they did that exact same show, but with a different doctor. Yeah. And so then I started realizing that. And so I said, well, I'm going to start creating my own content. And so I started doing Facebook Lives probably around 2018. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. And that's when everything for me exploded because my practice closed down. I had no patients. I had no money coming in. And I promised my employees I'd pay them as long as I could during this time. And I felt this desire at that time to try to do something to help. As a plastic surgeon, they didn't want me in the hospital. I volunteered to my local hospital if they needed me, but they didn't need me. And I didn't want to just sit at home and watch movies and do nothing. And so I started just creating educational content. And then I started creating content. And it's like, well, even the educational stuff, like there's only so much you can do. I thought, well, I'm just going to create some stuff that's fun. So I started going on TikTok and I started making fun videos, never dancing, but just doing kind of fun little things. And that's really what exploded all of it, was that was going on TikTok at that time. Because I was one of the early doctors. It was me, Ricky Brown, and Matt Schulman were really the first 3 plastic surgeons on TikTok. And I think Dr. Miami may have been on around that time as well. But that was it. It was just us. And because it was just us, like we pretty much had a stranglehold on anything plastic surgery related, and all of our accounts exploded at that time. And that's really what got me where I am now. So really all the videos I was doing on my own, because of the whole pandemic and stuff, like I didn't want to bring in like video people or anything. I was pretty much doing everything. Now I do have an in-house video guy who edits videos for me. He does some recording. I've got, my own little in-office studio here. I do have a social media person, but she kind of does front desk and social media for me. But I would say 95% or more of the ideas are mine. And I come up with it, I script it out, and we do it. I also have some video producers that will help me with editing and stuff. But basically, I do the vast majority of it still myself. And it's because I enjoy it. I don't golf. I work out. I honestly don't have tons of friends here because I'm either working with my family or working on this type of stuff. And so it's kind of what I do with my spare time.
Like how many hours a week would you say?
So like on Mondays and Wednesdays are basically my office days, but in the evenings I may spend an hour kind of, crafting some stuff out here or there. Tuesday, Thursday, I operate till usually around 3-ish in the afternoon, just depending on the day. And I may come back and record for an hour, maybe hour and a half. or work on script type stuff. And then Friday, pretty much all morning to early afternoon, I'm like doing the podcast, or I'm writing, or I'm video, YouTube content, or short form stuff like that.
Are you working with influencers at all, or have you had any luck with that?
I mean, like collaborating with influencers. I mean, I have like a fake beef with Dr. Charles Lee, so we we collab together.
You and
Subio, yes.
Studio, yeah. What are
Yeah.
those are almost like your affiliates. Like I mean, I'm assuming because you all have such huge followings. That's brilliant, by the way, to keep mentioning him. He mentions you, Subio mentions you. Like that's really smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's people who, and Ricky Brown's the other one, that people who are prominent there, who have fun with it, who I know, like it's interesting because, like I've known Charles Lee for a long time. When I did my fellowship out in LA, Dr. Ellenbogen called Charles Lee and said, "Hey, I've got a fellow here. Would you mind having him watch you do some Asian blepharoplasty surgery?" Because I was trained in Grand Rapids, I hadn't seen any of it. I'm Korean myself. I'm like, I'd love to watch some of it. Dr. Ellenbogen didn't do it. So Charles Lee was like, "Oh, yeah, he can come on in and watch." And so that's when I met him. He got really prominent on Instagram and TikTok over the last couple of years. And we just created this fun fake beef now that people seem to really enjoy. So that's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, really all of it is now what I'm doing is, I kind of, because I've got this long wait list, I don't really feel the need to have to try to convince people to come see me, like market myself so much. And I think that's one reason why I do well, is because it's not all like, here are my before and afters and stuff. That being said, it's really interesting, Catherine, is that there are some plastic surgeons who've done really well where their pages are mainly education and marketing, So there are doctors, a lot of them who are doing facelift surgeries and stuff, showing their before and afters, and really that's what they spend most of their time doing. And there are people who are really interested in that. But for me, I started off kind of, like I said, creating content that I found was entertaining and educational at the same time. Some of it's just entertaining, some of it's just educational, and some of it's probably neither. but hey, at this point, it's fun to just do it, and it flexes my creative juices.
Well, what else is super helpful is social proof. Do you have any tips on how do you get photo consents, video consents? How do you get the patients interact with you? Because that will never go out of style. Patients love to hear from other patients. So any tips there?
Yeah. So one thing I do actually is I have different channels. So for Instagram, I've got two Instagram accounts. I've got my main account, and then I've got Youn Plastic Surgery, which is that's all the before and afters. It's information from my office with my estheticians and stuff like that. So I have that actually siloed into two separate groups, and I will cross-populate a little bit, like in stories, where I'll send people to my Youn Plastic Surgery account if they want to see the before and after stuff. So what we do in my office is every new patient, in their intake forms, there's a question of, are you interested in sharing your story, with media or on our social media? And they have three options. It's a definitely no, possibly yes, definitely yes. And so before I do any surgery, my staff will look at that. And if it's a definitely no, then we don't want to put any pressure on them. We don't really ask them, most likely. If it's a possibly or a definitely yes, then my staff actually, before, in their pre-operative visit, will ask them, are you okay if we film some of your surgery for social media? And if they say no, then that's fine. We don't do it. If they say yes, then that's when we bring it in. So it's really just part of the intake form, and then my staff will ask them. And then it's just a very straightforward consent form. I think I may have gotten it from one of our societies, actually. And then I have like a separate phone that's not connected to the cloud, does not have a number or anything, and I just record the stuff there. I edit those before and after stuff mainly all myself. And then we'll post it on my Youn Plastic Surgery ones. Now, lately, we've done a couple where we've tried to produce them a little bit better to see whether that may do better than just me cutting and pasting stuff. And we'll see. Like, the jury's still out on those.
I think it's amazing you have all these skill sets. I mean, I don't know how you get it all done, but good for you, because it's also very authentic and very entertaining. God, you're just doing a killer job with this. Good for you. So I know we have a hard stop here. Just last question. Tell us something we don't know about you.
So one of my big things, I was talking with my PA the other day, and one of my big things is I think when I look at what my legacy is going to be eventually, my legacy, honestly, I love helping patients and I love doing plastic surgery. But what I really want my legacy to be is my wife and I are really into dog rescue. So we rescue senior dogs. We've recently had some foster dogs and stuff. But that's really, I think, where I want my legacy to be. Like, yes, I'm proud of being a surgeon. Yes, I'm proud of what I've done for my patients. But I think in the end, it's going to be how many lives can I save from these shelters? And so that's going to be, I think, for me, my next focus eventually as my practice someday winds down is trying to help especially specifically dogs that are in need, specifically older ones. So that's, I think, something that a lot of people don't know. And that's something I've been sharing, but I don't want to share too much because I don't want it to seem like it's, self-congratulatory or anything like that. But I think the more people know about rescues, because, my first dog that we bought from a pet shop. And there's so many breeders out there who are breeding dogs when there's so many needy dogs that are in shelters that are just beautiful animals who are kind, who are gentle, who would make great pets. But because they're in a shelter, people forget about them. And I think that the more I get it out there that you can adopt a beautiful dog who's going to be a perfect dog for you, even better than one you can get from a breeder. And at the same time, you'll be a hero because you'll have actually saved a life. That's the message I really want to try to get out there as much as possible.
Well, I will remember that forever because I saw you on Instagram and I am a huge dog lover. And I thought, oh, that's good. That works.
Thank you.
Okay. If anyone wanted to get a hold of you, I know your website is dryoun, youn.com. Your Instagram is Tony Youn, MD, but then your other Instagram with the photos is Youn Plastic Surgery. Any other way they can get a hold of you or?
Nope, that's probably the best way. I mean, Instagram is where we focus most of our attention on. I love TikTok. So that's the other one that I really, really love as well. And I've got the YouTube channel and the podcast and all that. It's all fun. But most of the time, Instagram is kind of where the plastic surgery patients and plastic surgeons like to hang out.
Well, congratulations. You're doing a killer job with this. And
thank you so much.
Booked out, not bad. I still would say just increase your prices by at least 10%. Okay.
I have.
That's it for me, everyone. We're going to wrap it up now. And if you would please give us a share and a review at Beauty and the Biz. And then if you've got any questions for me or some feedback, please leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com. Or you can certainly DM me on my Instagram at Catherine Maley, MBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want. But you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.